Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our training program. Oh, man, it's going to be great today. I've got two of my heroes in the martial arts. And if you're in the martial arts business, and if these two guys are not your heroes, then that's a problem. And we're going to talk about the reason why, not just because they have been around in the martial arts for a very long time, but they're what I call the get her done guys. They make it happen, and always excited to hang out with them. I'm generally hanging out on their podcast, and they're part of our program today. So I want to thank you guys. And today we have with us Grandmaster Jeff Smith and Grandmaster Stephen Oliver. So how are you guys doing?
Wonderful. Looking forward to this.
Great. Glad to be here, Grandmaster Bowen. Always good to talk to you, sir.
And everyone, we're laughing because check your 5 closest friends. And I always try to keep my 5 closest friends are those people that are really moving forward. Again, we have a lot of fun, but when we stop having the funs and laughter, and we got to go out and go to work, and I don't like working. And I'll tell you right now, I like to be able to get things done and make it happen. And if I can't have the skill sets to get it done, then I have to go to work. And that's the way it is in the martial arts community. If you don't have the skill sets to really get it done, your business. And I know that's one of the key things in this training program that we want to focus on is martial arts business. And when I'm meeting with people, I always say to them, there are 2 things. They're not really connected. There's you, the martial artist. That's you. That's, my kick, punch. This is what I love to do. And then there's you, the school owner, the business person that I run a business. I pay taxes. The government wants to make sure I'm making revenue, or they're going to tell me they're going to close me down anyway because they're not getting enough taxes. So there's a lot of different things in there. So we do want to clarify when we are talking about growth in the martial arts industry. This is the 21st century. AI is taking over. So, you have to ask yourself that question. There are the things I love doing, and there's the things I want to do for a long time. And, if you haven't retired, one day you want to step away and you work because you want to work, and you don't work because you got to work. So that's 2 different things there. So you want to make sure. So why don't we start off with you, Grandmaster Smith, and just give a short introductory. I know you don't give me the long one. I know you have the long one. A short introduction.
We can divide it into, let's say, 3 categories.
Okay.
One, me as the competitor, world champion kickboxer, #1 point fighter in the country, and then me as the martial arts, running 12 schools, martial artist with Grandmaster June Rhee, and then me having my own school. So with those 3 things is what we put together with our extraordinary teaching book to give people the insight of how that classroom can affect the growth of the business if you know how to work it properly. And we're not just talking about doing a side kick properly or, getting a better punch or a stronger punch or faster, but it's how you can keep those students, make them better, of course, but, teach them how to set goals and stick with your program, how to get those students. So I'll let Master Oliver introduce himself now. And I will say, Grandmaster Stephen Oliver as our new 10th degree black belt. He was just promoted at our black belt testing up here in Colorado last weekend. Unbeknownst to him, he about fell out of his shoes after we finished calling all the students for their belts and diplomas. And then I told everybody we had one more. And I started bragging about how hard it is to get a 10th degree and how long it takes. And he was, in the back of his mind, he was thinking, what the hell is he doing bragging on himself? And I say, and you guys are very fortunate to have one here getting awarded tonight. And then he started kind of getting the picture. And then I pulled out the belt, and then he
No, I
fell
wouldn't
down.
get in the picture yet. My feet hurt. My ankle was swollen. I was tired.
I mean, we had been 2 days of doing black belt testing, and that's 2 full days, all Friday and all day Saturday. And it was coming on to 9 or 10 o'clock that Saturday night as we were finishing up. So, yeah, his feet were hurting him.
Yeah, among other pieces of my
Congratulations.
body. Thank you. That means I'm officially old. 57 years later in martial arts. So I started when I was -10, I think. The brief background, Jesse, not to bore everybody with that, but I kind of consider my background to be like that book Rich Dad Poor Dad. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We were training in a branch of the Junior Institute that was at the Oral Roberts University, Tahlequah Junior College, YMCA, YWCA, et cetera. And everybody that I was surrounded with, which I think is most of the industry, frankly, were convinced that it was impossible to make a living running a martial arts school. It was impossible to do everything. I keep talking with people who say, you just use the term, the 5 friends, 5 closest friends. Most martial artists are hanging around with broke people and are getting convinced that it's impossible to run a school or make a living. I went to Washington, D.C. when I was, 20 years old, to go to Georgetown University because I had a job. Jeff Smith had offered me a job teaching for the Junior Institute. I thought my path was going to be get an MBA at Harvard, go to work in Wall Street, and be a kickboxer. I very quickly decided the world champion kickboxers were all a genetic mutant breed that I wasn't quite cut out for. So the idea of getting kicked in the head repetitiously for a fairly small amount of money didn't appeal to me. But I did learn that they were running a multi-million-dollar chain of martial arts schools. And instead of being surrounded with people who were broke and who were telling me that's the only option, he was driving a Mercedes, living in a beautiful house. Junri was living in a mansion, driving a beautiful car. Nick Okinas was driving a Lincoln and a Rolls Royce and so forth. And I found out there was, not only a career to be made, but a career that was as lucrative as whatever my other options. So instead of going directly to Harvard, I moved to Denver and opened 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months. By the time I was 25 years old, I had 3,500 students. And it was definitely at that point kind of abandoning the poor dad and adopting the rich dad philosophy. And I tell people I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, and it wasn't money. I was broke, but I had a chance to, for 3 years, watch what Jeff Smith was doing running the school, what Junior Institute was all about, and so forth. And then over the years, I've, run my chain of schools, developed it into an international franchise, acquired NAPNA, and ended up doing coaching and consulting, starting with how to use the internet to run your martial arts school 25 years ago. And of course, we're on the leading edge or bleeding edge of AI and all of the other stuff now. But, Master Smith and I have been working together for many years, both in my Mile High Karate schools, but also then with Martial Arts Wealth, teaching school owners just like Nate how to be successful with their schools. So we've got a big stable of school owners, if you will, that are $1 million, $2 million single school operations who are netting 50% or 60% of the gross and are able to drive the Mercedes or the Porsche or whatever it is they want. More importantly, they're developing a lot of students, high quality, high skill level, high integrity. So our guys are really having a dramatic ripple effect through their communities with the martial arts instruction.
Oh, really a key point there. And everyone, we're going to get into the good stuff, but this is important here because this is our testimony. And if someone's got a testimony, if they did it, then you can do it too. I know when I opened up my school in 1980 and I bought a Karate International franchise, I'm out of North Carolina with Sensei Jan Wellendorf. And, at that time, the Karate International franchise was a new hot thing, one of the first organizations to start doing contracts. And I tell people about people that say, well, I'm not going to put anybody on a contract. And I say to you, every month you have to re-enroll every student you have in your school. Every month you have to re-enroll. So, and what got me involved in the martial arts and made me want to decide I wanted to open up a school, wasn't my love for karate or the martial arts. I'm working at Rockwell International, general machinist. I was probably making $7, $8 an hour at that time. That was really great money. And, they made $10,000.
Well, that's $45, $50 an hour now.
Yeah. They made $10,000 in 1 month. And I'm looking going, how many hours would I have to work at $8 an hour to make $10,000? At that moment, that did not make any sense to me at all. And so I enrolled in their management training program, and because they required you to have a minimum of an associate degree or bachelor's degree in their school management. You had to be educated before they would sell you a franchise. And I ran that franchise for 39 years until, got involved in the publishing part of that. But I'm saying all that to say this is that take a moment and think about where you are in life. And do you want more? Is there something else? Is there another door or something you want to be? So get the idea that money is bad or money is evil. We're not even talking about evil. We're talking about success. So if I do the right things and I produce enough people and everyone wants to train with me, then that's prosperity. And I tell folks real quick, if you don't like money, but you're doing a great job, you trying to find a way to give it away. We are a nonprofit organization. You can always send us a check, but again, this is very serious. We're laughing and having a good time here, but we're really doing this to message. And how do we get the message out? And guys, I really do appreciate, everyone. I hope you can see the magazine. Great magazine, great article in here, and they're going to be writing for us the business section here, for the rest of this year. And really, really grateful. We've got some of your schools that are in here this weekend coming up. We're celebrating them as our empowerment school of the year, and so that is a key. So in the martial arts, are you empowering people? If you are empowering people, they will stay with you. If you're not empowering people, they will find something else to do. So, that is a really, big key. But let's talk about your article and why did you, choose that? What is your message? You got someone that reads it, and we want to start interviewing the writers in the magazine so we can understand their why and the mission, and what can the reader get from it.
Well, Jesse, go back to what you said a minute ago with the school owners. Is there's this mythology in the industry, and you hear it sometimes phrased as McDojos or bell factories or one thing or another, and I phrase it as mythology because here's what happens: is there truly are folks that are teaching, I don't care if it's in the YMCA or it's a professional school, who are low talent, don't have a lot of background, don't have a lot of substance. That's not the people we're working with. The people we're working with have substance, background, capability. But what happens, in order to grow your school, you've got to become a really good teacher, a really good master teacher. And then if you want to grow a big organization, you've got to become a master teacher of teachers. And you've got to develop, in order to keep students long-term, you don't water down the curriculum. If anything, you make it more substantive and more robust, but you've got to have systems in place so that you build relationship, build rapport, that they feel progress, and they're moving forward. So if you look at the very top schools, they're some of the highest quality physically. And I can go back to when Jeff Smith was running the June Ree Institute, we had, half of the top 10 kickboxers in the country were, many of them on staff. We had 2 of the 3 world forms champions were on staff. The quality of the black belts at that organization were better than, anywhere in the world. With my schools, back when I was doing the open tournament circuit, we had to tone down the black belts because we would take groups and they would dominate everything that they were happening. And even after that, people would say I'm a belt factory. It's like, no. This is about having high quality curriculum, high quality teachers. And the other thing, and I got in trouble for this among a lot of the attendants, but I did I've done many times, do seminar tours around the country. But, one of them I started out with, you guys think your students are so great, but most of them suck. And they would look at me and shocked, and they would say, well, my top black belt is this or that. I say, yeah, but your average student drops out in 4 months. So they never got very good to begin with. And 4 months after that, they were back to where they started. That's your average student. Your average student isn't the 1 out of 500 that struggled through to get to black belt. That guy or gal was going to be good no matter what they did. What counts is how many do you start? How good do they get on average? How long do you keep them on average? And most schools, as you know, it's 3 months, 6 months, maybe. They never get very good to begin with, and then they drop out very early on. So I always consider these people who tell me, I've only promoted 1 black belt, or only 1 out of 100 get a black belt, or they're the ones who are admitting failure. If it was a high school, Detroit Public Schools, and they say only 40% of our kids ever graduate, that's when you need to fire the superintendent, fire the principal, close down that school, get new people, put a new system in place. That's a crisis. You shouldn't be bragging about that. You should be figuring out what you're doing that's repelling people rather than keeping them.
And 2 of the biggest problems with school owners are they tend to wear it like a badge of courage or something if they can say, oh, it takes 10 years to get a black belt in my school, or, oh, no, not anybody can make a black belt in my school. And then I always say, when they say that, I say, wow, you must be a really bad teacher, if you can only get that many. And the other thing they like to use is that if your school's making a lot of money and you have a high grossing school and with a lot of students, then now that is what they want to call a belt factory. Well, maybe a belt factory in that you have so many every month that are testing. It's running like clockwork, like a factory, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the students. The quality of students is based on their testing on a regular schedule and have certain standards. But what we found is the poor school, the schools that don't have many students, that have a low gross, they all need what I call a crutch. They need they want to have a loser's limp. They want to have an excuse for why they can't make that gross. And it's going to be, oh, in my area, you can't do that because we don't make enough money. This is a low demographic, or whatever the excuse. And it was so funny. Master Oliver was talking to one of the school owners, and I don't like to use names because we don't want to put anybody on the spot. But he was in the San Francisco area.
I like putting people on the spot, but we'll let you be polite.
So it was in the San Francisco area, which is one of the highest demographics in the country. And when we were talking to him about raising their prices, the first thing he said, he says, well, you don't understand. There's no way I can raise my prices here because everything costs so much. Well, the reason it costs so much is because everybody makes so much. But then the ones in the low demographics are going to say just the opposite. Well, they can't afford it because they don't have enough income. So, in other words, it's an excuse for not making it. What you got to do is find more excuses to be able to make it. We've already proved it with our many, many members, where we have some of the schools in the worst demographics in the country doing 100,000 a month. We have schools in the best demographic doing 100,000 a month. So it really doesn't matter where you are, because you can be $1 million school with as little as 300 students. And that's the thing, that pricing is such a picky thing or a touchy thing with a lot of schools. Well, I can't raise my prices because the other schools are charging blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what the other schools are charging, but most of the school owners are charging more, or they're charging less than the June Institute was charging back in the 70s. Back in the 70s, we were 197. And we get schools coming on board with us now that are charging 120 or 150, and they don't want to raise their prices. And I go, your rent went up, your payroll went up, your marketing went up, everything's gone up fourfold, fivefold, tenfold in some cases. A Corvette back in the 1970 was like $4,000 or $5,000. Now it's $100,000. So if you don't raise your price with everybody else, then you're going to be broke. But you have to know how to implement that. And that's part of the things that we teach everybody in our extraordinary teaching book and with our members.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Jesse.
Well, I'm sitting here and my brain is telling me, so the biggest problem is mindset. Mm-hmm. The big problem is mindset. So everyone, if you're listening to us and you're still hanging out with us, so we're talking about mindset. And because it's, if you think one way or you think you don't have, you cannot have. But if you think that all things are possible, then you're going to draw those things to you. And that's the reason why, being in association with people that think that way. I know the very first book, because you got to educate yourself. I mean, this is the problem, and this is what you guys provide, is an education. If I don't know, I can come to you and I can now educate myself. So mindset is about getting rid of one thing and adding something else. The very first book I ever read, I had never read a book before, and I'm 21 years old. I don't know how I got out of high school, but hey, that was a long. I'm better today than I was then. But anyway, but the first book that O-Sensei Wellendorf gave me to read, and I still have the book, it was called Think and Grow Rich.
One of my favorites.
That was the very first book. He said, here, take this, go home and read it. I'm going to ask you questions tomorrow. But you see, what he was doing was developing my mindset to think outside of the box. So essentially in the growth process, and what you guys do and is to really begin to work with the mindset, because if I don't change the mindset, no matter what you tell me, I still don't get any better. That's where you really have to you really have to start that process. And I know when I would hire staff to come and work for me, the very first assignment they would have was to go out house hunting. You had to get a home, but you couldn't look at anything under $300,000. And they had to come back and tell me where they went and what. Because if I cannot get you to see and move beyond your poverty mindset and getting you to think about how good you are, how blessed you are, how many opportunities you have, because at the end of the day, it is not the material things. You don't take anything with you, but it's always living, heaven on earth. How can I be the best? That's why the Who's Who books are about your legacy. What will be your legacy as a martial artist? And if you get out there, and if I can now help more people, then that's what happens. So as a teacher, if I'm going to be a martial arts instructor, that's what should be one of the top things, is for me to teach people, to help people to learn the martial arts. If I don't want to deal with the management, then I need to hire me a manager, send them to you guys, train the manager, but you have to be careful because they'll start seeing success and they want to open up their own school. So, that becomes a problem. But that is a key that we want to know, because you can read this article in this great magazine, which is a great article, but if you don't comprehend it or if you don't apply it, it still doesn't work. So, that's the reason why, I'm always telling people and really recommending you guys, because I've been seeing for years, the results of what you produce is hang out with the best. And guess what? And you will become the best. So
You
what?
bet.
Okay, we understand that one of the key things is mindset. So what is it? I want to be better. So, Grandmaster Oliver, what would you tell me if I wanted to be better? What would you tell me? Where would I start at being better? I know that's the thought of being better is the beginning.
You bet. You bet. When we talk to school owners, there's some commonalities. One is they all think if they just had more students coming in the front door, they'd be in great shape. They all think that their students love them, that they're a great instructor. Their problem isn't dropouts. Their problem is they're getting 5 students a month now. If they had 15 students a month, they would be great. And that is one of the things we teach. We teach marketing and how to develop traffic and so forth. But in almost all cases, when I say almost, I've talked to one school owner that I said, yeah, your retention is great. You're right. Otherwise, mostly they don't know. They don't know that they're losing 10% a month. They started the year with 100 students. They enrolled 120 students. They ended the year with 100 students. They don't even realize that their biggest problem is they're going out the back door as fast or faster as they're coming in the front door. And so there's a lot of moving pieces of that. But surely school owners, if they start with hanging around successful school owners and being deaf to the guys who are broke. Matt Smith and I have this debate a lot, and I say, don't hang around with them. And he says, well, we like hanging around with, and I'm like, no, I'm like this. I don't want to hear what they have to say. I don't want to model their behavior even subliminally. I want to be around people who are successful at this. I want to be not hanging around people who are unsuccessful. Heck, I felt diminished by talking to 3 broke guys last week who spent 30 minutes each trying to sell me on why they were unable to fulfill anything in their school. And every time it was, I talk to my friends who run schools and they tell me how hard it is. I talk to my friends who tell me I couldn't charge any more than I'm charging. I talk to my friends, hang out with different friends. If you're hanging out with a bunch of school owners who have hundreds, if not thousands of students who are high quality, who have made a living like Master Smith and I have for over 40 or 50 years running martial arts schools, now you're talking to the right people. But if you're talking to a guy who's running a day job, working the school part-time, grossing $3,000 a month, and taking his advice on anything, you're barking up the wrong tree. So I always start with that. Surround yourself with people who are successful. That's what we do we bring everybody together in a mastermind environment, and they're sharing ideas with people who are very, very, very successful at what they do. And many times they're doing 10 or 20 or 30 times what they're doing when they come in. And then secondarily, Master Smith likes to talk about stats, but we're keeping numbers on every piece of the operation. But we're keeping an eye on student quality, on retention. Some people call it churn. We're making sure that once we put them in the school, we're keeping them as long as possible, creating the highest possible. There's rule number 1, always turn your phone off. So we're helping them stay on top of numbers so that they're not managing subjectively, they're managing objectively, and they really understand what's happening in their school so that they can develop from there.
And that one thing you said real quick, Master Oliver, you can't imagine a big corporation who didn't track their marketing, who didn't track their numbers on what they were spending, what the return on their investment was, how many leads they were getting, how many of those made an appointment, how many intros you had, how many enrollments, how many renewals, what was your total gross, what was your dropout rate. All of those things you have to track, and then you have to do them on a monthly basis and set goals for increases. And you get your team together and we set a goal. And schools tend to be very hypocritical when they're telling their students, that it's important to be a black belt. In other words, set your goal, and a date to reach that goal, and that's going to help you reach it better. Have a plan with the different belt levels to get there, et cetera, et cetera. And then they don't do it themselves with their own school. Their goal is to do whatever they do, and they don't track it at all. And it was the hardest thing that I got new members to do, were to keep accurate stats, because when we look at the stats, we can see where the holes are. We can see where they're losing those students, what they need to focus on. So, keeping those stats, that's on the business side. But most of the black belts that are running schools, they'll go to a Bill Wallace or Joe Louis seminar to improve their kicks or punches or fighting, but they don't go to all the business seminars to improve their martial arts business. And even going to a seminar or reading a book by itself doesn't help you. It supplements you. You had a teacher that got you to be a black belt. That's why the way we've gotten our members to $1 million schools and above is by having weekly meetings with the beginner group. Another day we have the intermediate, another day we have the advanced, and they're on Zoom just like we are. And we're training them, working on their basics, the intermediate and advanced, and slowly bringing them along and reaching their goals. So you have to have a whole training system the same way you do at your school on attaining belts. We apply that same system for them to become a black belt in business. And to be a black belt in business takes about 4 years for your first degree. And we classify that as a first degree if you can get to the 1 million. When you get to 100, it's like a second degree. And then 125 is a third, and we keep jumping up like that. But this is how we get schools reaching that, because now they have realistic goals and they have plan of action that we help them develop to help them reach those goals.
Yeah.
What?
Well, and in most cases, unfortunately, martial artist has come up under an instructor who didn't know how to do, run a successful professional academy. They may have been, again, a great technician. They may have been good at conveying that information, but they didn't have the benefits that Master Bowen had. They didn't have the benefits that Master Smith and I had of coming up with people who had already mastered the broader piece of how to run a successful educational institution through martial arts. And again, there's a lot of moving pieces, but the most important piece is to keep in mind what your objective is. Your objective is to have a massive positive ripple effect in the community, have a long-term, permanent positive impact on your students, and have a financially viable organization that is going to be able to perpetuate itself and allow you to put in, invest your full-time efforts. The other thing I might add, just when it comes to financially, that Master Smith was saying, I see people running around and they talk about $1 million schools. Well, really what we're doing is we're teaching school owners how to have as minimal brain damage as possible, staff up, organize, and put systems in place so it's replicatable, and to have a high percentage of net profit. So I'm not impressed with somebody who has a warehouse and has 25 staff members and is doing $1 million a year with 3 or 4% net profit. On the other hand, show me somebody with 250, 300 students, super high quality, with a lean staff who's bringing 50 or 60% to the bottom line. Now I'm impressed. And so what we're looking at is low brain damage, high impact, ripple effect to the community, high quality, happy students, and a high net profit that allows them to perpetuate and develop the organization. The Develop a Leadership Academy or Be a Leadership Factory was the original title. It's all about developing I always throw that in for Master Smith. His kid crawls when he hears the factory thing because of the idiots who say belt factory. But what it is, you want to develop a system where you're developing a second layer, then a third layer, and a fourth layer, and a fifth layer of leadership. And then ultimately you're designing and orchestrating systems and other people are implementing those systems. That's the only way you develop an organization of substance.
And a couple things that we've touched on. And I think this is very important. Again, as our listeners, if you're a martial artist or an individual, number one, we talked about goals. That is a key part. What is you have it written down? It's on a vision board. I have a vision board that stays up here in front of my desk. I'm looking every day. I've got my goals written down. I know exactly what's going to happen. But the belt system is one of the first tools that a student is learning, because from white belt to yellow belt or gold belt, that you have to set some type of vision. And that's the reason for dropout, is because people have low visions. And in many cases, kids don't quit. Parents quit. And because it's not that I'm teaching Johnny, but mom's over here. She is bored. 6 months in, she's ready out. So what do? I mean, you need to have something for the parents to engage, because kids are not paying for classes. They're not driving themselves there. But if you got a goal system that they can see working for their kids, then maybe you can even share it with them to make their lives better, because that's what this belt ranking system is. And it's the same thing of your achievement, is that every time you go up, then you now have a new space to grow from, all the way up to 10th degree black belt. Now I'll share my 10th degree black belt moment with you. O-Sensei promoted me to 10th degree black belt. I've been working all my life to get 10th degree black belt. I wake up the next morning and I go out and I'm going, okay, now what?
Yeah, what's next?
Like it's like I realized excuse me, that I ran to the end of the road. So it hit me that I have to reinvent myself. And that I wrote a book on that, on the reinvention. You must reinvent yourself. So when you get to these different levels, it's not over. There is that next level of growth. So if you are a martial artist or any individual, you have to understand, if you have reached that plateau, then you have to reinvent yourself. If you've got that 100 students, reinvent yourself. You've got, how many people do I help? How many people do I actually change? And the other thing is building your brand. You see, because the martial arts schools like churches. I'm a minister, and there's a church on every corner. So now I'm trying to transfer martial arts into the church business. But I'm trying to help people change their lives.
Sure.
So and what you have to be able to realize is that as you got to build your brand. Number one, who are you? And that's what we try to do with the magazine, is to be able to, when you're featured, so we have 10, this is the front cover of the magazine, but we have 10 other people that have this same cover. So now in the branding part, and you're featured in a magazine, when I now do my presentation, or my manager does the presentation, we hand you a copy of this magazine. The instructor signs it. That's one of the first steps of building relationships. And that's the other thing, that when you are, enrolling students, your dropout is because you probably don't have a relationship with that student. Now, we're not talking about personal relationships. We're talking about that student respects you. So, I mean, magazines, the very first day I started in the martial arts, what sealed the deal was a magazine I opened up, and I saw a picture of Chuck Norris holding a giant trophy cup. I knew at that moment I wanted to be a karate champion. I didn't know anything about the business, but I wanted to be like Chuck Norris. Now, if I hadn't picked that magazine up, we may not be having that conversation today. So the power and that's the reason why I've gotten so involved in the magazine market. And we're launching our new website this weekend. Of course, it is called the Martial Arts Extraordinaire Magazine.com. And so we're creating ways of helping to promote you and build your brand as a martial artist. Put them out in the barbershop, put them out in the salon, give them to people because you want to build your brand and your influence. Put up, we're giving this weekend, we're going to be giving people certificates they can hang on their wall saying that they were, inducted as Empowerment School of the Year. We've got the Hall of Honors coming up. So it is building your brand reputation because in Durham, I stayed on top of the schools in the Triangle because I'm at Duke University, So when you read in my profile, I'm a professor at Duke University, physical education. I'm the bowling coach, the martial arts coach, the meditation coach, and I got 6 classes I teach on the physical education. But I've trained my black belts to be assisting. So it's not something I have to do. I can still run my school because I have a quality staff. But because I was at Duke, then when you looked at my resume, then of course, you got Duke and you have Carolina, and it's always a battle there. But I also worked at Carolina. So all those things helped me to rot my reputation. When you came in, you had certain expectations by my reputation. So that, building your reputation and through marketing, that when people think about your martial art, when they think about martial arts, and they want to be thinking about your school, they want to be thinking about you. And of course, you have to be doing things in the community, building relationships to make this happen.
Yeah. Now, Georgetown was bitter rivals with Duke, so that was when I was there. I always heard about that rivalry. One thing you said a minute ago, and you can't underestimate the depth and benefit of reputation and visibility in the community. And I always felt in Denver, in Washington D.C., Junri Institute the same way. Is if you wandered the streets and you asked people randomly, what martial arts school is here in town, there was only one answer. There wasn't 2, 3, 4. In Denver, it was Mile High Karate. I don't know anybody else. In Washington D.C., it was Master Ree. You want to be so omnipresent that's the only thing that's top of mind if you're really going to do a great job with it. Go back to one other thing you said there, though, is how do you keep mom engaged? How do you keep the parents engaged? It's got to be a compelling vision. You mentioned your vision board. If the parent has the vision of my child is going to be valedictorian and they're going to be off to West Point or off to Harvard or off to Duke, their martial arts, they have this picture of them graduating for their black belt, becoming a teacher, becoming a leader. If you have that vision fully formed in their mind, it's very difficult for them to drop out. On the other hand, if they're only showing up Thursday because they came on Tuesday and they're hoping the child has fun that day, and that on Thursday they had to fight traffic and somebody cut them off in traffic, and they were running in 5 minutes late because of all the frustration, it's easy for them to drop out. But if they have that empowering vision, here's my 7-year-old when they're 12, here's my 7-year-old when they're 15, here's them graduating from high school, going off to college, here's them being immune to negative peer pressure, never having problems with drugs, never having problems with bullying. If they have that vision in mind, all those little daily aggravations don't come up and creep up at all. They're excited and motivated about what it is. But the mistake that we make is we think that it's all about how much fun they had today in class. No, it's about that long-term empowering vision that not only the child, but both parents have about where they're going to be in 3, 5, 8, 10 years. And if they have a strong enough vision, whether it was fun today or not, and whether the traffic was bad or not, or whatever else, doesn't get in the way. And if they don't have that exciting, empowering vision, it's really easy to get derailed on a minute-by-minute basis.
And you said something about the parents being engaged, and we really have we doubled down on that. We have 2 ways that we want the parent engaged, and even though there's two ways, we've got to have at least them be engaged in one of them, or they're not engaged and they are going to drop out or not encourage the student to stay there. And the first way is have family classes and have the parents start when the kid starts. And we show them with other parents in the class how easy and how much fun it is. And when they see the other parents in the class, then they decide, well, I'm here anyway, I might as well do it with them. And we give them incentives to do that. So one is to have the parent actually take the classes with them, because we find that the families that do it, we just had the black belt test in Thornton, Denver here, right in the suburbs of Denver. And we had about 75 students testing for black belt, and 3/4 of them had parents and taking with them that were graduating because they emphasize that when they start. The second thing is what we call our character worksheets. These are the things that the kids are doing at home to reinforce those good habits that we want them to learn on their journey to black belt, to teach them that discipline, to teach them that respect, confidence, and focus. And one of them is like their self-discipline sheet. They're going to do something around the house to help mom or dad without them asking. And when they fill out 30 things and they turn it in for their belt graduation, they receive a medal for it. So it's not like a participation medal. It's because they did 30 days of doing things around the house. Well, how happy does that make a parent? Well, we have a job list where they also check off every day a couple of things that they're doing on a list, because some kids, we have a healthy eating sheet where kids learn to eat healthy, because we're educating them on the benefits of eating healthy and not the junk food. We have a reading club where they're reading and getting credit for reading any book, and we emphasize educational, but whatever they want to read, because we find the better readers are the ones that do better in school. We have the practice sheet where they're doing their homework, their martial arts practice at home is another one of the sheets. So when you have those kind of things that they're doing at home, then the parent doesn't want them to stop doing that, because those habits are helping around the house, showing the respect, using words of respect, thank you, please, you're welcome, yes sir, no sir. Those kind of things are very important, and that they do at the martial arts school, that they start learning to do at home and learning to do at school. And these are the good habits that we emphasize that are important on their journey to black belt. And that's how, when we get the students engaged like that, the parents have to keep track of the sheets for them. So now the parents are engaged, the parents know what they're doing. And that's how we it's almost like regular school. A kid isn't going to say, I don't want to go to school. And the parent says, okay, if you don't want to go, don't go. Parent knows it's good for him and they have to go. You're going to school. Too bad. Well, it's almost the same thing with martial arts. It's good for you physically and mentally. It's going to develop all of those extra, what we call life skills, to help you become a leader. And that's what parents are looking for.
Well, yeah, you're correct. And this is the great thing you guys do. You actually do that. And again, guys, you can check out their book. It's on Amazon. Where are some other places they can get a copy of the book?
Extraordinaryteaching.com. Extraordinaryteaching.com. They can get a free digital copy immediately. They also will get a copy of the previous book, 6 Simple Steps to Fill Your School, which obviously is more marketing oriented, and a bunch of other free resources. And there's no obligation. It's just you can get the immediately free digital copies there, or go to Amazon for the physical copy.
And great. And everyone, of course, the American Martial Arts Alliance Foundation is a nonprofit organization, and we're getting ready to do our scholarship program. We give the Future Leaders Scholarship, and we give the Cynthia Rothrock scholarship for girls. So when you purchase a copy of the magazine, you're helping us. And we also are reaching out and want to do a big part for the Chuck Norris organization this year too. So when you go and buy a copy, send me your receipt. And we've talked about this and Grandmaster Aller and Grandmaster Smith. So, we're going to set up, when you buy a copy of the magazine, you're also going to get a chance to, log on and take a class with them. And it's just information. So it doesn't hurt to sit and listen. Just like this broadcast today, listen to it several times, because when you hear it the first time, you may hear talking about success and money and prosperity, and you're not there yet. But maybe when you listen to it 4 or 5 times, you'll realize we're not talking about vanity or being vain. We're talking about we're helping people. I want to be just like in the publishing. I want it so when you say publishing, you have to say Jessie Bowen. You have to say, the Martial Arts Extraordinaire Magazine is called being the best you can possibly be at what you do. And that's how you leave legacy and be realizing that everybody has a purpose in life. And if you haven't found yours yet, then again, martial arts is a place that you're training yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, and you can make a connection with your higher self. Everyone has a purpose. And so, don't feel like, well, I'm an average person. It's because you have decided that you wanted to be average. And we just want to say, we want you to be the best you can possibly be. Any final words from you guys?
Let me just add for everybody out there, if you want to be more successful in life, more successful in your martial arts school business, more successful in your martial arts physical training, then you have to do 2 things. One, we have to make sure that, and you mentioned it, how the impact that one book, Think and Grow Rich, is one. Power of Positive Thinking. There's so many more of those motivational books, because a lot of these school owners out there, they're the Lone Ranger. They don't have anybody to motivate them, to inspire them. See, even if you have the technique on how to be successful, if you don't have the motivation behind it. So that's why when we're teaching our members, we make sure we teach them the how to do it, but we also give them the motivation to have that. I always equate that with somebody who has a Ferrari but doesn't have any gasoline. Okay, I've got a great Ferrari. It's fast, but it ain't going nowhere because I don't have no gasoline. So you got to have the knowledge, but you got to have the motivation to apply that knowledge. And that's what being in a group on a weekly basis and hearing other people like we're teaching our members is how we've been able to succeed with so many of the $1 million schools now.
Yeah. And, one of the principles from Think and Grow Rich is the power of the mastermind. And so the value of being around other successful school owners who have the right mindset, both, you need mentors who have been there, done that. As Master Bowen, there's what I not too charitably call the bozo explosion going around the industry. A whole bunch of people who never did it themselves or were never able to replicate it across multiple locations and multiple people. So you've got to have mentors who have been there, done that. And then you've got to have that power of the mastermind where you surround yourself with other people who are thinking in the right way, who have your best interest at heart, who are thinking in the right way and are success oriented. And then you have to have the strategies and tactics. But the strategies and the tactics are almost secondary to mentorship and the mastermind effect that comes with it to help you grow and develop from there.
Well, yeah, and you're exactly right. And I do appreciate you guys coming and being a part of our training program. This is the first time we've actually done the Martial Arts Extraordinaire Magazine Awards online presentation. And we did this because we wanted to recognize those people who were really making an impact, teaching them how to be able to use magazine marketing in their martial arts school. We want to encourage them to be able to write. If you're looking to publish a book or write a book, then reach out to Elite Publications. That's elitepublications.org. We've helped thousands of people share their biographical information. Now we're turning around teaching them how to write their own books and how to monetize their books and how to be able to build that influence. Remember, you've got knowledge in the graveyard's the richest place in the land because everyone, took all that knowledge with them. Share that knowledge, make someone better, be a part of that because this is what we really want to do. And so if someone wanted to get up with you guys, where should they go if they needed to, set an appointment or learn more? How do they get to you?
They could reach out to our national director directly, 720-256-0200. I'm sorry, 0208.
0208.
0208. I should have that memorized, shouldn't I? 720-256-0208. They can directly reach out. We're happy to chat with them. Or as we mentioned, they can get the book directly and get a lot of other information directly at Extraordinary Teaching with no obligation. But lots of free material there.
Again, if they call that 720-256-0228, they'll speak with our national director, Bob Dunn. And what he'll do is he'll find out a little bit about them and their school and what their goals are. And then he'll set them up with a call with me so I can go over what their goals are, what they want to accomplish with their school. And then I'll set them up with Master Oliver after that. So they actually end up getting 3 calls at no charge that are going to help them with their school. Whether they want to be part of our program or not is strictly up to them. There's no obligation, but it gives them a chance to hear how the other schools all became $1 million school and plus. And it was just by doing the same thing. Picking up the phone and calling 720-256-0208, talking with Bob Dunn, then me, and then Master Oliver. And then if it looked like it was a good fit for everybody, they joined. And if it wasn't, then at least they educated themselves and they got some knowledge that could help them. But either way, it's a win-win. So don't miss that opportunity. Take advantage. Don't miss this opportunity. It might be the thing that has been missing from your school for so many years that you can now change your whole outcome for your school.
And one thing I would say is that regardless, they leave with benchmarks of how they're doing relative to the top schools in the industry. They leave with a benchmark of how their dropout rate is in comparison. They leave with a benchmark on how their lifetime student value, monthly student value. They leave with a benchmark on marketing efficacy and flow and what's working. All that's free. We'll look at their marketing. We'll look at their enrollment process. We'll look at their student retention, their student longevity, and their student lifetime value, and give them benchmarks on what school owners who are very profitable, what they're doing, as well as profitability percentages, and give them direct feedback on that.
Well, I want to say, thank you for being a part of the Martial Arts Extraordinaire Podcast today, and hoping everyone gained a lot from this. Remember, hearing something one time, it really doesn't do it for you. Then, you want to hear it, several times. You can go to Spotify, and our podcast is there. Again, this is the Martial Arts Extraordinaire Podcast. And we also have the Becoming Author podcast. And the new podcast we just launched is the Power to Live Your Vision podcast. So it's all about helping to make the world a better place. So everyone, remember, be blessed and, keep your kicks up. I'm out of here.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.